Five, four, three, two, one. I'm John Miglash for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. I try to do something fun every day, but the news sources that I follow are just overwhelmed with what to do with your brand, what to do with your stores, what to do with all your decision making, your hiring, everything related to Black Lives Matter. It's not even about racism in general, because there's plenty of different kinds of racism. I've felt, well, I was told at one conference, I said, "Why did you stop inviting me?" And they said, "You were just a little too vocal about your Christianity." That's like a hate crime. I mean, you expect it. Jesus said to expect it. So, it says when you're persecuted, rejoice, because you get reward in heaven. So, hey, way to go. And I won't say the name of the guy who said it to me, but he actually said it to me years and years later. And I was always one of the highest rated speakers. Um, so as a victim, we all want to share our victimhood. I want to share mine. I don't know much about being black. I just know a little bit about being a person. And I'm a person with a white beard. That makes me a minority. I know people who say, I had a person say to me, I would never buy something from a man with a beard. And I was on straight commission sales in 1976 out on the East Coast for a summer, and I had the beard for a couple of weeks, and my sales were just awful. And I shaved it off, and as far as I can tell, no one ever acted in a way that discriminated against me. No one ever was mean to me or whatever, but my sales were terrible. I shaved the beard off, and bang, I was back to my traditional average sales per week. So, discrimination is a tough thing, and some of it's just confirmation bias and other things, I have to say. And I'm not saying that's what it is for blacks. I don't know what it is. But we all have to overcome that, and I figure that's kind of their problem, and I don't like shaving that much. So I do what I do. My wife would rather I shaved it off. She says I look 70 and I'm only not quite 70. Okay, so let's dig into this issue and see if we can find anything out that might help you. Okay. First of all, I asked my Google Assistant, do Black Lives Matter? And the answer came back. Let's see if it comes up. That's not the one. This is the one. The answer came back just like they said it would. The answer came back, Black Lives Matter. Black people deserve the same freedoms afforded to everyone in this country, and recognizing the injustice they face is the first step toward fixing it. So I asked, because I thought this would be helpful, since this is the first step that Google Assistant gave me, what injustices are blacks facing? And it said, this is what I found, and it had all kinds of articles about it. But it didn't have any quick, snappy response, which I was hoping for, because, as I said, I don't know much about it. Okay, so if some people think this is all AI, but actually someone wrote that, obviously. Google Assistant doesn't write its own copy. And so I would ask people to help me on that one. So then we talked about the other day, big business is contributing. And here are some issues, and I don't know that these are systemic racism. I did some charity work in the inner city. We used to live very close to the inner city, or maybe in it, depends on low income housing was across the street. So, I don't know. Milwaukee's very segregated, so sometimes one street makes a big difference. But it's Good Hope and Teutonia, so if you know that area. And so we did some work, and we would go into, more of the inner city, and they'd have a huge big screen TV. And I didn't have one. In fact, I still don't have one. I've never had one. And I never pay real money for TV because I don't value TV very much, And I said, maybe they would be better. That money could be better spent. And a friend of mine who did even more work and a lot of work with black churches said, John, you don't understand. You were raised in a family that talked about investments, talked about deferred gratification, but in their culture, it might be that the status. I mean, there are some cultures where, women wear a lot of gold, and that's really their dowry or their life savings. And so there are other cultures who express their wealth or their status in more tangible ways. And he said, you understand that there are other ways that you can look less wealthy but be wealthy, and it's not just it's partly a cultural thing. Okay, so that's something to think about. And I thought, that's an interesting idea. But in this article that I mentioned, only 1% of venture capital-backed startups are headed by black founders. So black founders of businesses typically don't get much venture capital. Now, I've never gotten venture capital either, because my dad never taught me how to start a business. I just, went to a bank and got some money. And I never took finance in university. I took philosophy. And it says, and only 3% of venture capital investors are black. So this may be a fallout of just that culture. Nothing wrong with that. You can express your wealth in any way you want. I know rich people who own art, and if you go to their house, it's just beautiful with all the art. I don't own much of that, but I do own a little because I worked for an art company, a couple of them. Okay. And so some investors have gotten the memo, and SoftBank quickly put together a $100 million opportunity fund that invests only in companies helmed by people of color. Okay, I guess you can do that if you want to, right? There are all kinds of venture funds. You can have a venture fund in technology or healthcare or environmental issues. So that I don't see anything really wrong with that. And there are Christian investors who try to invest in Christian companies. Okay, I mean they're just basically doing their homework and doing your homework for you. And so that's an interesting approach, and I give that some credit. Now here's another interesting article. That's the one I already went to. This one, it says that more workers put squeeze on their companies to support Black Lives Matter. So we're going to talk explicitly about Black Lives Matter, supporting Black Lives Matter. How do we support Black Lives Matter if you decide you should? Okay, employees at Adidas, Microsoft, and other big companies are turning up the heat. Microsoft, 250 of the tech giant's employees. Now that's like, I'm sure that's not even 1%. It's like a teeny fraction. But it made the news. Backed a letter calling company execs to support the demands of Black Lives Matter Seattle. Now, the first question I would ask is, what are the demands of Black Lives Matter Seattle? Because I am having a hard time. If you are ahead of Black Lives Matter and you're watching this show, I would like to know the demands, other than just send us millions of dollars, because I've seen story after story after story about companies saying we're going to send $1 million to Black Lives Matter. And so I don't even know what that's about, right? Now, last week, Microsoft donated $1.5 million to groups focused on advancing racial equality. Okay, I don't know what that means either. And I went to a site that says, how do you help Black Lives Matter? And it had a lot of sexual orientation groups that are helping support those groups, which is okay, but I'm not sure that the black community is all in on those groups, so any more than anybody else. I don't know. I really don't. But it wasn't about helping blacks. I know that. I mean, I could tell. It wasn't explicitly about that. Lots of groups that were other causes, not Black Lives Matter. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just go to donate to Black Lives Matter. And if you go to blacklivesmatter.com and you push the button, I'd like to donate, you get this page, Black Lives Matter, fund the movement. We appreciate your support and ongoing fight to end state-sanctioned violence, liberate black people, and end white supremacy forever. I don't know that those are issues. Scott Adams has put out a call to find any examples of systematic racism where the system is doing that. The statistics seem to be kind of on, you're more likely to be killed by police white than black. It turns out, based on number of arrests for violent crimes, unarmed blacks were not even a dozen last year. So it's, I mean, I'm not saying it's not important. It's important, okay? But this is what you get. So anyway, it turns out that Act Blue Charities is a registered or charitable organization, and there's a whole on the site. There's a whole section about what you're really giving to is Act Blue. And so I went over to Act Blue to find out what that was about. And so here is Act Blue, and Act Blue seems to be related to the Democratic Party and to funding. In their mission, it's to helping fund. They said we've raised $5 billion to fund Democratic candidates and grassroots movements. And everything that BlackLivesMatter.com cites is about the registration of Act Blue as a charity. But you may not know this, but contributions or gifts to Act Blue are not deductible as charitable contributions for federal income tax purposes. Okay, so if you're thinking of donating just to Black Lives Matter and going to their site and giving them $1 million, it would be a good question to ask of, are you just donating to Democratic candidates? Act Blue, it's not clear to me. And if so, do you realize that most of the places where the protests were held were longtime Democrat cities, states, etc.? Most of the protests. So it seems like if there's systematic racism, it's been funded or contributed to or managed for the last, Minneapolis hasn't had a Republican mayor for 59 years. So you might ask yourself, maybe there are better ways to fight racism, if there is, if you can find out what you're fighting. Let's, happy to listen to comments. And you may want to ask where the money goes. So I always recommend people give to the charities of their choice, but find out about the charities of your choice. Because it seems as though Act Blue is a charity in the sense of helping grassroots organizations fundraise. And whether the organization itself is or is not a 501c3 depends on the organization. You can fund Act Blue to help them with their software development and their marketing, perhaps. But that isn't necessarily a charitable contribution, according to federal tax laws. So it's complicated. Just saying, like everything in this conversation, it's complicated. And since I don't know the answers, but I thought I might raise the questions, that's what I'm doing today. So like and share. I'm open to your comments. Have a great day. Your friends will think you're smart. Bye-bye.